Hey everybody, this is Damien from Guitar Journey here, and today we're going to learn specific methods and a mindset to help you build guitar solos that matter, that actually say something, that take the listener on an emotional journey. So right off the bat, I'm going to suggest that if you're kind of stuck in a rut, you're playing in the correct key, you're playing some cool licks, but you still feel like you're not really communicating with your instrument, really saying something, then I want to suggest that this video may be for you. And that being the case, I am going to make a couple of assumptions, okay? I'm going to assume first that you are actually comfortable playing in the correct key of your song, okay? Now, if you're not comfortable with that, I do have a video specifically on how to find the right key, and I'm going to put the link to that video in the description below. I'm also going to assume that you've at least gotten your feet wet with soloing. You've at least started to play around with it, started to play some licks and so forth, and you have at least a little bit of a comfort level. If that's not the case, if you're looking for help getting started soloing, you guessed it, I've got a video for that. I've got a 5-step approach to getting started soloing, and that link is going to be in the description below as well. Okay? So, here's the situation. You have a song, and you're playing a lead to the song, and it sounds pretty good. You're playing correctly in the key, you're playing some cool licks here and there. It sounds fine, but it just doesn't seem to go anywhere. It doesn't take the listener on that emotional journey that I mentioned earlier. Let's talk about 5 methods that you can use to really build a solo that stands as what I like to call a song within a song, a composition within a composition. Now, throughout, I want to suggest that you really try to think structurally. For today's exercise, you want to say to yourself that you have a certain number of measures to build your solo. And you can use the ideas that I'm going to give you today as suggestions for how to build your solo towards its peak, towards its climax in that certain specific number of measures. The way I think about it, you need to have a destination in mind. And of course, that destination is the high point, the climax of your solo. But you also need to get there at a certain point. You need to progressively build up to that high point. Otherwise, you're just kind of wandering aimlessly, not knowing where you're going to go or when you're going to get there. Now, even as I say that, there really aren't any rules when it comes to soloing, right? And for every idea, for every suggestion I give you today, there's probably an example of a legitimately awesome guitar solo that does the exact opposite. So I'm giving you these ideas today that can all work together, but none of them are required. None of them are rules. All right, so let's get right to it and start to put together our method. When composing a lead, we want to think of it almost as a story, and it should establish a certain mood, it should develop, it should evolve, and it should reach, as we said, that certain climax. So idea number 1, the first thing you can do, the first idea, is to establish a motif right off the bat. A motif, a sort of a hook that you can develop and also that you can allude to at different points in the solo. The motif can be a fragment of a melody from the song or something else. And, as a tip, if you're kind of stuck for coming up with a motif, something you might want to do is orient yourself in a given scale fingering and use a wide interval leap within that scale fingering to help you establish that motif. So, for example, I'm going to play over the chord changes to the B.B. King classic, The Thrill Is Gone, which is really just a blues, a 12-bar blues in the key of B minor. And I'm going to start today with a certain motif, a short melody that I can develop based on a wide interval leap within my B minor diatonic scale. And after I've established the motif, I can depart from it, play some other licks, but then return to the motif, or maybe even just a fragment of the motif. I can allude to it perhaps in a higher octave, and that'll help give the lead a sense of cohesion. So it can look and sound like this. So that's the first step. Establish the mood of the lead, establish something memorable, some kind of a hook, maybe a certain motif at the start of the lead, and you can then allude to the motif at different points in your solo. Step number two. Step number two concerns range. In a nutshell, try to use the entire fretboard. If you kind of stay in one position or one area of the neck, things are going to start maybe to get a little bit repetitive after a while. But something you can do to build tension is to play a certain lick or a certain fragment of a melody several times in different octaves. So again, working the changes to the Thrill Is Gone, I'm going to play a certain simple lick, but then I'm going to play it in different octaves to develop a sense of motion, a sense of building towards something. And here's how that can look and sound. Okay, on to concept number three. That concept is note density, which is really just a fancy way of saying you want to blend slower passages with faster passages, fewer notes contrasted with more notes, okay? There are a lot of really effective ways to do this. One idea I like, because it creates that nice contrast, is you can just play a faster passage out of a certain scale to punctuate or to conclude a certain lick. So again, let's say I'm in B minor, and I'm playing something, I'm playing just this kind of bluesy sounding lick here, just holding this lick, holding this bend, you know, maybe I release it, and now I punctuate it with that short, faster passage, okay? Now for something just a little bit more involved, if you have the fretboard knowledge, maybe you do some sort of extended run, either an arpeggio run or a scale run over the chord changes. Depending on the tempo of the song, you might be doing 16th notes, sextuplets, whatever. So I'm going to give you a couple of quick examples, okay? Pretty easy to execute in measures 9 through 12 of that 12-bar blues that is the Thrill Is Gone, okay? The chords go G to F sharp and then 2 measures of B minor. G, then F sharp, then 2 measures of B minor. So I can spell out those chords using some pretty basic arpeggios. You don't need to do a bunch of sweep picking or fretboard tapping or anything like that to make use of these simple arpeggios. That stuff is awesome. But for now, I'm just going to go with some simple 2-string arpeggio shapes with some pull-offs. They're pretty easy to play. Here's like a G arpeggio. My pinky's on the 15th fret of the 1st string. Right, I can find the F sharp here. I can find a B minor here. Okay, and I'm going to do that over the chord sequence, okay? Here's those arpeggios with the backing track. Or, like I said, I can do something involving a scale passage, maybe something with some repeated notes, something like this. So again, our third idea is to utilize both slower passages and faster passages and to contrast them. And as your solo builds towards that high point, you might want to play with greater intensity, more fast passages, perhaps building your way up the neck, like I mentioned earlier about using the entire fretboard, okay? Idea number 4. Consider what I like to call mood and texture. For example, you can contrast, there's that word again, contrast. You can contrast more elegant melodic passages with more aggressive, almost noisier passages. You know, I can play sort of a melody, something like a, or maybe some double stops, something like that. and I can contrast that with a sort of, grittier lick. Maybe I'm going to contrast that with something like that, okay? And again, since the whole idea is to have a lead that sort of progresses, you might want to play more melodically, more elegant passages earlier in your lead. And as the lead progresses towards that high point, you might want to play grittier, more aggressive passages, okay? Finally, our fifth and final idea. Consider sound. If you're an electric guitarist, don't forget that you can use different effects to convey different moods in your solo. You might want to start the lead more mellow with a cleaner sound. Kick in some extra gain, some extra overdrive as the lead progresses. You can also use effects like delay and reverb to create a certain ambient space that might work really well, really effectively. For example, if you're playing more subtle passages with fewer notes. But then again, on the other hand, as your solo reaches its climax, you might want to kick in some extra reverb, extra echo, whatever, do some whammy bar tricks, whatever, to just really create a certain sense of mayhem, a certain sense of excitement for the conclusion of your solo. That's legit too. If there's a common theme between the different ideas I've given you today, it's that your lead needs to develop. It needs to progress. And a way to do that is to have many contrasting approaches, whether it's faster passages against slower passages, lower notes against higher notes, more elegant passages against grittier sounding passages, all that kind of thing. So that's a handful of ways that you can build a solo that really progresses and isn't just a collection of licks. You want to have a sense of composition with your leads. Here's how you can get started with this today. Find a backing track. There's some really great backing tracks here on the Guitar Journey channel. And of course, here on YouTube, there's just a million backing tracks, okay? Find a backing track, but don't just play aimlessly over it. Remember what I said towards the beginning of the video about thinking with a certain sense of structure. I want to suggest that once you get that backing track, you say to yourself, I'm going to play a certain number of repetitions of the chord sequence, a certain number of measures. Okay, I mentioned earlier that the Thrill Is Gone that I've been using for my examples today is a 12-bar blues. So you might say to yourself, okay, I'm going to play the entire 12 measures a total of 4 times. Now, of course, that's 48 measures. I'm going to build my lead over the course of those 4 repetitions of the 12-bar sequence, okay? Once you have that sense of structure in mind, you can start to really build your lead using the ideas that I've given you today. And I think that if you do that, your solos will have a much greater sense of purpose, a much greater sense of cohesion, a sense of direction. You won't just be noodling. You really will be playing a song within a song. All right, that's what I have for you today. First, let me know how your solos go, really. And if you enjoyed today's video, please be sure to like it and also hit the subscribe button. There's really just so much content here on the Guitar Journey channel, and I'm adding additional content all the time. So please hit like and hit subscribe as well. Now, if you really, really, really like today's video, please buy me a coffee. Buy me a coffee in the link below. And finally, if you would like to, feel free to leave a comment. Maybe you have another idea for helping build a solo that I didn't mention today. You can share it so we can all learn from each other. I really do believe we're building a positive musical community here, and I love the idea that we can all share ideas with each other. So hit like, hit subscribe, and if you would like to, leave a comment as well. Thanks so much. Have a great day.